Welcome to Six in the City, the podcast where 620-somethings talk about shit and some of them live in cities.
I'm Jen.
I'm Lexi.
I'm Nancy.
I'm Elena.
I'm Jane.
And I'm Robin.
Hi everyone, welcome back to our podcast. Today we're going to be talking about budgeting and personal finance, which is actually one of my favorite topics. And today we have Robin, Jen, Nancy, and myself, Jane. So just to get the group started, I have a question. The first one being, do you budget? And if you do, how do you budget? And how strictly do you budget?
I've definitely budgeted a lot more since knowing I would be moving to the city and now that I live in the city, because I wanted to save up in order to come here. And so that really started or kickstarted my budgeting. But I'd say like always throughout my life, though, I've been more on the frugal side. And so I would just not necessarily have a spreadsheet in the past, but be very mindful of my spending and how much I have in my account and how much on my credit card bills and whatnot.
I don't budget that well, honestly. I don't have a strict budget for myself. I just kind of mentally know what's too much for like a month for my credit card and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say I have like a spreadsheet, which I should, but I've just never gotten to it.
I'm the same as Jen. I definitely don't budget, even though I should. And even though Jane has actually created the whole entire like spreadsheet for me. So it's
I have about you don't budget.
I know. I'm so sorry. I have no excuse. And it's not like I like shop around much. I really, aside from like subscriptions and memberships, the consistent spending would be food.
I see. Well, Nancy, it is disappointing that you don't budget. We sat down and budgeted together. But
I know.
Okay, whatever. I do budget, but
You budget the most.
I do budget. My budget's, well, it was very strict, especially while I was living at home. And I was like, wow, like I don't pay rent, like I have no expenses. I'm so rich. Like, what do I do with all this money? So then I like was really specific about where my money was going. But then, so living out in California, I'm like, what's a budget, Like Nancy said, I guess I do have like safety nets that I can pull from, but yeah, this week or this month is a little out of control, not gonna lie. But it's okay.
But it's valid. Like you don't die with your money.
But like the way that I budget, in terms of retirement contributions, it's all automated. I can estimate I have like this much for my paycheck. I'm gonna put this much is like, that's like a non-negotiable. It's going to savings, and then whatever's left is what I have to spend. But then I like adjust the numbers so that I'm like, I have like X amount to spend per month, and that's how I budget. But then under that X amount, it's like that covers food, like discretionary. I'm not like $300 for groceries, $200 for eating out, just like $500 for whatever. Yeah, but like ever since 2021, I've been actually tracking like every expense. And I've been like keeping track of all my transactions in Excel, and like I have it categorized. It's like really interesting to see like where I'm spending money and then like what my savings rate is, my investment rate, things like that. So I don't know. I'm just kind of like interested in my own personal finance data. So I'm like excited to see what it'll look like at the end of the year. I also feel like I'm so type A and kind of a control freak in the weirdest ways, that I'll like, without this kind of controlling hand over my finances, I like lose control, and I can literally feel my life spiraling. So like, I feel like I need those reinforcements just like keep myself in check.
I used to do the line by line, especially when I was budgeting in order to move to the city, to really keep track of where I can spend less and save more. And it was definitely helpful to get a better understanding of my spending habits. But for me personally, it also caused a lot more stress, because the thing is, inevitably, for some things you just have to spend money on, like disposable income that I have, how am I using that? I'm a little more lenient with myself in not needing to know like specific cent by cent breakdown of what I'm spending my money on, just because for me, it's like, it can get stressful sometimes, but yeah.
Some people, like a lot of the Reddits that like subreddits that I follow, there are people like, I've become so like type A about this, it's hard for me to spend. like the
Mm.
anxiety to spend.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
again, I completely get that, but I think it's also really important to just be mindful of like you need a balance. Like again, like you can't take it to the grave. So I do try to like specifically save for fun. Like this part of my paycheck goes to like my fund.
Right. Do you guys know of that show, Extreme Cheapskates?
Is it like the
I've heard of it, but I've never watched it.
I've like
Is
seen,
it
I
people
think
who are
it's
really
like,
stingy?
yeah, I've never seen full episodes, but on Facebook, like clips will pop up and I'll get suckered into them. But yeah, it's like people who are really, really cheap. And these people are making money. Like there's a woman that's a millionaire, literally, but they're so cheap because they just came from backgrounds where they were homeless or just living paycheck to paycheck. So then, like, I understand the mental trauma that they are going through for sure, but it definitely is an issue, especially if it starts affecting your loved ones. The one example I can think of is the millionaire woman. Her ex-husband, who has like a really good relationship with her still, would drive her around because she doesn't have a car to save money. When he divorced her, he gave her the house because he knew that so she wouldn't have to like pay like rent or whatever. He'd come over every week to clean her house because like she wouldn't clean it nor pay for anyone else to clean it.
okay,
And
this
then
is
she
a little extreme. Like
wait,
extreme.
there's one more. She fed him cat food instead of real like human grade tuna. I'm sure there's a difference. And it was to save like 18 cents or something. So she made him a tuna sandwich out of cat food tuna. So I just saved myself 30 cents. Like
Wait, I have a funny story about that. When my parents first came to America, like they were grad students, like we're not from like a rich like family in Korea either. So they were like really poor. So like they ate like cat food instead of like human grade tuna. But like okay, I honestly don't even know if it was because of the money situation or it's because like lack of language.
oh no. They just saw tuna.
Oh,
Yeah. So like it sounds really sad. I say it out loud and it sounds really sad. I feel like that's kind of like similar with like immigrants. Like, just
Right.
I don't think this is like a really like special story. I think it's like pretty like common when it comes to like immigrants. But like my dad tells me the story and like he's obviously not like traumatized or affected. He's like, isn't that so funny? And I'm like, yeah, it's so funny, dude.
So do you think that they laughing about it after the fact because it was like, haha, we didn't realize it was cat food, or haha, look how far we've gone now when we used to have to?
Combination of both.
Right.
I mean, like obviously there's like other stories that they tell that they're not like that's not funny. Like that was actually really sad. That's like part of the immigrant struggle, But we can get into
Right.
that more at a later time.
yeah. Well, I actually think that kind of does relate because even just hearing that story of your parents, it like definitely makes me realize that the reason I grew up being so frugal is because of what I heard my parents talk about with their struggles, especially being immigrants when they came. They both came around 16, 17. And so for them, like also didn't come from affluent backgrounds by any means and were really struggling. And so when I hear them, even though they're like laughing about it, they're like, yeah, cup of noodles would last me 2 days. Haha. I'm like, oh, haha. But just like hearing them talk about it growing up, and thing is like when I say this in front of them, they get really upset, but it definitely influenced the way that I handle my money because more so I'm very careful in the way I spend my money. And so I wouldn't say that I'm very well versed or financially literate, but I am a very like careful spender, and it's definitely because of hearing the struggles my parents had to go through and then just trying to be mindful of that from a young age. So I think it does relate.
For
Yeah.
me, I think it's the opposite effect because growing up, like similar story, my family came here, had to literally start it from the ground up. And my family, they are in the nail tech industry. So it's really a lot of just handling with cash. So seeing them be strict with the cash and like literally physically in your hand, this is the only money that you have. Like, what do you do with it? And now, because like I'm on my own now, more independent, and I have money that is no longer physical, it's like all in a bank. I use credit cards and stuff now, and I have, more than I did when I was younger. It's like, oh, now I can spend it all on things, like it's like the opposite trigger in my brain. It's like I can actually do this now.
I can see that. Yeah. And I think the way that you spend money definitely is stemmed from the way that you were raised, and it could go like either
For
way.
sure.
It could be like, oh my god, like now I have money, I'm gonna spend all of it, versus like, oh shit, like cat tuna, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I'll but have a single tear roll down.
Cat tuna is so funny, right? So like what are some things that you guys refuse to like waste money on? So like an example would be like coffee from Starbucks every day versus like just having like your own coffee machine. And then part two, what are your favorite things to splurge on?
I think for me, the first thing I can think of, things I don't want to ever really spend money on, is designer goods. I don't think I've ever personally bought myself something like clothing wise or bag wise that is extremely expensive, but it's not really like the price, because I bought myself a Nintendo Switch, and I bought myself other things that cost the same amount of money as like designer goods or clothing. But I think it's the fact that it's like clothing or just a bag. I can't really justify it personally.
Like just
So
the name, right?
Name
Like,
brand is
yeah,
really
and I'm sure maybe my mindset on this will change when I'm older, but for now, like I'm more content spending my money on things that I use literally every day.
what do you splurge on? Like what is like you're like, yeah, I'm gonna buy that, treat myself.
Honestly, recently it's been K-pop and anime merch. I have been really treating myself with buying K-pop albums that I really enjoy, and I've been buying like the anime figurines. I don't know, something about it just gives me so much joy because I look at it every day and it literally gives me serotonin. And I think technology wise, I like to splurge maybe. Like I recently bought an iPad Air, and I think that's one of like the biggest purchases I've ever made for myself, because I bought the Apple Pencil too and everything, and I bought a Switch during COVID. I don't know, I feel like that's all over the place, but I like to splurge on things I use on a daily basis. I think that's like my overall theme.
I really agree with Jen, especially with the name brand designer stuff. Like, I obviously think everyone should invest in things that bring them joy. And for some people, name brand things really do.
Mhm.
But I think this also kind of ties into how parents and family upbringing can influence, because my mom, for example, really never cared for name brands, but like my aunts do. And so there's a stark difference I saw when they would want to get the newest like Louis Vuitton bag, or when we were living in China, they like wanted to check out all the fakes and be like, haha, I have a real one or whatever. But like my mom doesn't care. And so as a result, I feel like that really influenced me in not caring. So someone I know recently bought a pair of Dior shoes, and they're just like high tops, but they're all white, and they're like $1,500. And to me, I'm like, yikes, because knowing me, I'm going to get those white shoes super dirty, because if they're shoes, I'm going to wear them, especially on the streets of New York City, like it's going to get dirty. That's a little stressful. Like either I'm not going to wear it because I don't want to get it dirty, or I'm going to wear it and then it kind of loses some of its value because it's not holding that prestigious look. And like in Korean, they call it myeongpum. That kind of stuff really doesn't call to me. I think for me, and we talked about this a lot as a group, like our whole lives, but really like experiences, investing in like memories. And so, for example, trips, and traveling, I think that that's definitely something that I'm not hesitant to spend money towards, because I know that that's not benefiting just me, but also like the people I'm with, and it's going to create lifelong memories and create a good time. So those are some things that I splurge on personally. And
I'm the odd one out, and I'm a hoe for the name brand, and they're all laughing because they know this.
I didn't want to call you out, but I knew
you
this
know
was
what?
coming.
It's okay. It's okay.
Brings
I
you
take
serotonin.
Your red bottoms.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Joy.
You know, like
it
life's
does.
rough out here, you know?
Yeah. So and again, with Robin saying it stems from your family. So like I come from a Vietnamese family, and it's the stereotype is true. Vietnamese people are like big fans of Louis Vuitton, and it like goes back to French colonialism and like all these things, right? But we don't talk of, but like, we'll acknowledge that. But also growing up, like I got it from my family. So as they started building up their career and like moving up the socioeconomic status, like it was like a show off thing as well. Like, look at what I am now able to finally afford myself. So it's something that that I grew up with. And, Louis Vuitton is like the brand of the family, My most recent purchase, the splurge that I did were like red bottoms. And before that, like these are my first and probably only name brand designer shoes I will ever have, because like Robin says, like I have not worn them out in public yet because it's like, like I just have in my closet because it's just like so pretty to look at, and I don't want to like, their style, it needs a certain occasion. It's not like everyday shoes you would wear, right? And I'm like, oh, if I like scrape these or something, like I'm not at the mentality. It's like still like up in its little like shrine corner, and I stare at it every day. And one day I will wear it, maybe in New York or something on like a nice night out. I do value the quality, like they do last long. But for something that I currently do now, aside from designer brand and stuff that I'm splurging on, is on a personal fitness journey and a health journey. I'm allowing myself to splurge on having a personal trainer. And then I just started doing boxing classes with Elena. So these are things that, obviously cost money, but they're also fun. And like, doing boxing with Elena, I'm able to form memories with her and experience with her, because then we'll like grab food after. And for something that I wouldn't spend money on, it's like hard to say. In the past, I would have said salads at restaurants, but that I totally changed my mind now, because now
I will never change my mind. I will never order a salad.
I get that. Very valid. And for me back then, it was an excuse for me to just continue eating unhealthy, even when I was at a restaurant, right? I was like, why would I order a salad if I can make it for $3 at home? But some restaurants actually have good salads, and like, you just can't. I've tried to recreate like my favorite salads from restaurants, and it just doesn't hit the same, but I'll try to recreate it to save money. Now, like, I like have no qualms with ordering a salad.
I don't think we heard Jane's what you like to splurge on and what you don't like to splurge on.
I think in terms of what I like to splurge on, I spend a lot on travel. Like it's one of my non-negotiables from each paycheck that I take a certain amount out of, specifically for travel. That's like a pretty big portion of like where my paycheck goes. And like I guess that kind of includes like experiences in general. So like I'll have like my fun fund is for like short trips, but also like Disneyland. I don't think that's like travel. I mean, I guess it is, but like it's like an experience. And then I think in terms of splurging on like food, I think like a good food experience is always worth it. But like in terms of like what I really don't like spending money on, I think this kind of comes my newfound, it's not really newfound, my interest in like sustainability. So that kind of goes hand in hand with my interest in personal finance. I think buying clothes, for example, I'm on a 1-year boycott of buying clothes. Before I like bought clothes pretty often, but yeah, so like personal finance and like sustainability makes me think like I really want to avoid fast fashion and like have more sustainable like personal choices. So consume it, experience it. I'm all for spending money on that, but physical things not so much.
Right. So do you have a physical thing that
I splurge on?
Yeah.
Taking like a few steps back and like setting this up for context, like before I started working full time, I was like, I really wanted like red bottoms. That was like one of the things I was going to treat myself with when I started working. And there's a couple other things, like a Gucci belt. I don't know. And then I started working, and that's like really when I got into like sustainability and personal finance. So then that's when I was like I can do so much more with my money. I like ended up not buying like red bottoms or anything like that. And I think that's when really working full time has gotten me like into like minimalism, sustainability, personal finance, and things like that. Yeah, I remember like before I started working, I was like, I'm gonna buy red bottoms, like, whatever, it's fine. But now I'm like, no, I would never wear them. So yeah. Okay, I guess last question to wrap up. Like we're all starting our careers. What are you guys' like thoughts and experiences on lifestyle creep? So like once you started working full time and you had more income, like what are some things that you've been spending on, whether it's like just paying for convenience, like delivery fees, or anything like that. I guess like for me, for example, would be, okay, I definitely pay for convenience now, like a lot more than I did in college. So for example, when I was coming to LA, my suitcase was like 8 pounds overweight. And then it was like, I can either open my suitcase and somehow take out 8 pounds worth of shit, or I can just pay extra. For me, that's like a no-brainer. I would just pay extra now. But in college, I would have sat there I would have taken stuff out. I would have thrown stuff away if I had to.
You would have worn like a bunch of layers of clothes
Worn-
because you've done that.
Yes, exactly. I've done that before to save like $30, but now I'm just like, whatever, I'll just pay for it. So like, I guess that's an example of my lifestyle creep. I will no longer open my suitcase at the airport and repack. Yeah, I can't do that anymore.
That's so funny. I've never heard of the term lifestyle creep before.
Me neither.
Do you mind explaining it a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's basically like as your income rises, as you progress in your career, have more disposable income. Like instead of doing my own laundry, I'll just pay someone to like wash and fold.
Right.
Or things like paying for baggage, eating out more. That's like a form of lifestyle creep. Or it's like bigger house, bigger car,
Right.
buying more stuff in general.
Gosh, I have a lot. I don't know. Is that like a bad thing if I have a lot that I can think
I don't
of?
think it's necessarily a bad thing. Like I think my own personal finance mantra is you need to find a balance. I think people that have reached a point where they feel really anxious to spend money, that's like just as unhealthy as having like terrible credit score, I think. In terms of
Right.
stress and things like that. So I think as long as you have a balance and it works for you, then like
Right. Yeah. I think like the first one I mentioned earlier was having a personal trainer. In college and before, I would just try to Google workouts, and you can very well do that and be effective. But for me and personally, and just how mentally I am in my relationship with fitness, it's just been worth it for me. But it's not something I would have been able to afford prior to even this job with this salary, right? My dogs have pet insurance, that's like something that they wouldn't have had prior to me, having a full-time job. For convenience as well, like I don't clip their nails, I don't bathe them, I just pay for a groomer to do it like every month, every other month, and for me it's worth it. So I do a lot of things for convenience now, like the delivery as well.
One thing I can think of is subscription and streaming services in like two different ways. So I know back in college, I definitely felt this way where like I would have a Netflix subscription, for example, and I would feel guilty if I didn't really felt like I used my month's worth of like paying for like my membership, But now like I have multiple subscription and streaming services from Crunchyroll to Netflix to even my manga app, which leads to another thing where in college, before I had a full-time job, I was definitely more likely to illegally stream movies or read webtoons and mangas from unofficial websites. But now that I have more income, I find myself paying like, which sounds so bad, but like my manga app, for example, like I willingly pay a monthly subscription so I can read my favorite mangas from the most official website, like the official translations, and they come out real time with Japan and stuff. I think that's really great. And like movies too, instead of going on like 1, 2, 3 movies, whatever, I would willingly pay on Prime. Now like I'm willing to legally like have legal sources of my media consumption, which was definitely not the case prior to my full-time job.
Right.
Yeah.
Your webtoons and manga like reminds me of how like for webtoons, I like pay to like fast pass episodes, and it's things I would have never done without disposable
like,
income. Yeah, I would have waited for sure and like just come back, but now I just willy-nilly just click for it, it just charges to my Apple. That's so funny. Like just things like this, for sure never would have thought of.
I definitely splurge more when it comes to gifts for people. Like especially now, I think I'm much more willing to spend more money for a like quality gift as opposed to like a small like $15 to $20 thing I would just get on my own for them. And so that's something that I've really enjoyed doing, getting quality things for my friends.
Right.
Aww. Well, thank you guys for sharing your personal finance and your budgeting tips. Always happy to talk more. So let me know if you guys want to talk more. And listeners, if you also want to talk, I'll talk about it with you. So just reach out, and thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Yay.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Six in the City. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at sixinthecitypod.
This episode was edited by Robin, with music brought to you by Gandhira Pratama. Maybe we should put a disclaimer that no one should take any of what we say as financial advice.
No.
Not that they would, but like
Advisor. do not take my advice. Disclaimer, don't listen to me.